Zoom. That's so funny. That's awesome.
Okay, this says we're
Yeah,
not live on
Larry. Excellent,
Facebook.
man.
Yeah, I fixed something.
You,
Okay.
Lauren.
Yeah, it says it's now live streaming.
Yeah, we're live on Facebook.
All right.
Yay.
Musical interlude. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like old music for the.
It's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have to grab the embed link and stick it on a couple things, and then.
Okay, but we're live on Facebook, right? So we should.
Yeah.
I'm going to excuse myself for just a minute and call Pat and tell her.
Okay. Hey, if you're on Facebook,
Pat?
we are so sorry about the technical difficulties, but we're here now. And we're going to have this really fun, very casual virtual artist reception for a couple of the shows at Able Contemporary right now. Lauren is just doing some things to get this embedded on our website as well, so people can watch it through ablecontemporary.com. And then when she's done, we're going to start this thing. So again, thanks for the patience and sorry for the technical difficulties. We are going to be joined with artists who are in our current group show called Boxes. And then we're also joined by Ian Van D, who has a really, really outstanding installation in our gallery number 5 space. So how's it going, Lauren?
Going good. We are live on the website. Just opening up the PowerPoint again. All right, so we're gonna take a look at the walkthrough for the box show.
Great. So, again, welcome everybody to the Able Contemporary Gallery. For those of you unfamiliar, we are located just south of Madison in Stoughton, Wisconsin. We're in a historic, renovated former tobacco warehouse. We represent nearly 100 artists from across the United States working in all media. Every 7 weeks, we host 3 concurrent exhibits. Our current solo show is Tangled, New Oil Paintings by Gregory Schulte. A virtual artist reception was held last week for that show, and the recording is available on our website or our Facebook page. Today's event is for the other 2 featured shows. Boxes is a group show, an exhibition of handcrafted boxes, including the work of artists from across the country and encompassing both functional forms and artistic interpretations of boxes. Artists in this exhibition joining us today are Barry Roll Carlson, Richard Jones, Tim O'Neill, Tom Lozier, Katie Hudnall, Larry Stevens, and Reed Schoonover. Other artists in the exhibit who are unable to join us this evening are Lynn Hobeika, Brandon Norstead, Erica Schluter, Geraldine Verdon, and Ron DeCoke. I am also pleased to be joined by Ian Van D, whose show in our gallery space number 5 is Vacant Rites, Selected Works from the Splinters in Our Hands. I'm also joined by Lauren Miller, who is an associate with Able Contemporary and making today's event happen. And we are also joined by the Assistant Gallery Director, Ann Orleski. So everybody, thank you for joining us. And what we're looking at right now is a video of the show Boxes. And we'll continue to look at that. I also want to take this time to let everyone know that we are also hosting an in-person reception. It is RSVP only, and it's a limited amount of people due to COVID. That is tomorrow evening starting at 5 p.m. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to ablecontemporary.com. You can reserve a spot. I know we still have some spots available. You can also call the gallery tomorrow during business hours. We're open from 10 a.m. until 5 p.m. And the number is 608-845-6600. This evening, we're going to be talking with each of the artists about a particular work of theirs from the show. And you can ask, if you're watching us live, you can ask questions throughout. If we think that the question is especially pertinent to what the discussion is, we're pretty casual, so we might interrupt and ask the artist the question right away. If not, Lauren will be paying attention to those. Be assured that we'll answer all the questions at the end of this. We'll open it up to a Q&A at the end. So we're just going to keep watching this show right now for a little bit.
What's in Larry's box?
We're gonna talk about it.
It's a poem.
Ah.
It's a really lovely piece. And there's Katie's work. And Tom, you know, when we first, your boxes are the striped ones, the painted ones. I had no idea at first how large they were going to be just looking at the images. They leave quite an impression.
Yeah, really.
Okay, so Tom Lozier recently retired as head of the wood furniture area at UW-Madison, a position he held since 1991. He holds a BA from Haverford College, a BFA from Boston University's program in artisanry, and an MFA from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Lozier designs and builds one-of-a-kind functional and dysfunctional objects that are often carved and painted, and always based on the history of design and object making as a starting point for developing new form and meaning. He has received 4 Visual Artist Fellowship grants from the National Endowment for the Arts. He resides in Madison, where he often collaborates with his wife, the artist Bird Ross. Thanks for joining us, Tom. Tell us about your pieces in the show.
Okay. These are in the category of bandsaw boxes. They're usually described as bandsaw boxes. And maybe the sort of key conceptual thing when thinking about how they're made is that they start as a solid chunk of wood. So every one of those boxes came out of a chunk that was bigger than the original box. And then you don't have to use a bandsaw, but primarily using a bandsaw, you cut the wood into pieces using the trick of also rotating the piece in space, especially 90-degree rotations. So sometimes you're cutting its profile and sometimes you're cutting it in plan view. And you can cut parts out and remove it in order to make negative spaces inside. And so you cut the block apart and sometimes you end up with many, many different parts. And then hopefully you keep track of what goes where and you glue it back together with negative spaces inside. So I guess I've made a lot of these over the years. And what's interesting is they're sort of a subtractive process and then an additive process. So there you can see them with the lids sort of moved out of position, see what the insides look like. And so the only thing that makes these a little more complicated is I started tilting the table on the bandsaw. So the bandsaw isn't making 90-degree cuts, it's making various sorts of angled cuts. And so these actually have some compound angle things going on. So they get fairly confusing. I figure them out when I'm making them, and then I very quickly forget what I had figured out. So looking back at them, I would have to reconstruct sort of what the techniques were, but they involve tilting the bandsaw table and making curved cuts and rotating the block in space and labeling all the different parts and then gluing them back together with certain sections subtracted. And so that's the technical approach to them, but then I'm just sort of playing with the aesthetic. And I think black and white is I love color. I spend a lot of time working on color, but I think black and white is almost sort of, it's like this place, it's like a home base that I go back to pretty regularly because it's almost just sort of a relief because it's just so nice. And so when I made those 4 boxes, I was in one of my black and white zones.
You're great.
That's probably it. Unless there's questions, probably better to move on to somebody else.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Tom.
Yeah.
Really
So-
cool. Yeah.
They're very amazing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess, the other thing I would just quickly say about bandsaw boxes is woodworking is inherently slow, and bandsaw boxes are one of the few things I've found over the years where you can actually, at the end of a day, actually have a thing that you've cut apart and kind of glued most of the way back together. So it tends to be a little speedier than a lot of other wood processes.
That's gratifying, I would assume.
Yeah,
Yeah, very much so, I'm sure.
nice.
That's great.
So the lids are free, they're not hinged in any way, right?
Yeah, they lift out. Yeah, they're free.
The color's just such a cool surprise.
Mm.
Did you, Tom, did you determine the color by the shape of the box?
You mean the internal colors?
Internal color?
No, I just tried to. Those are actually fairly bright colors for me. I don't tend to use super bright colors, but I think I did want that sort of surprise when you open it up. So I just tried to mix up 4 fairly bright colors.
Oh, I saw the boat form there with the blue. That's what triggered that question.
Oh, you're ahead of me. Yeah, that makes sense. If I did it, it was unconscious. If I,
Nice.
yeah.
And
Good
then
going,
it looks like you've kind of taken a gouge and did some fluting on the surface too, or is that just
yeah.
illusion?
Yeah, so the wood is textured on the outside, and sometimes it's done with a freehand gouge, but I have to confess that a lot of times I use this tool that goes in a 4-inch grinder that's like a chainsaw wheel.
Yeah.
And I draw pencil lines, and then I try to follow the pencil lines as well as I can,
Sure.
which is actually hard to do. So you get a little bit of sort of shakiness, which is kind of fine with me. But it is a 3-dimensionalized surface. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, that adds so much to the. I mean, it's such a great compliment to the form to have those fluted, aspects on the planes. It's really a great combination.
Thanks.
Always liked that.
We should move on.
Thanks, Tom. All right, next up is Larry Stevens. Larry Stevens taught art, design, and music at Middleton High School from 1992 to 2016. He received a BS in art education from UW-Madison in 1992 and an MFA in 2000. Stevens was raised on a farm in Southwest Wisconsin and currently resides in Madison. This is a quote that I liked that you had, Larry. Inspiration for creating art comes from many different fields of human endeavor. I am interested in creating forms that are visually compelling and that suggest content right for the interpretation through association and metaphor. Ideas from literature, music, poetry, history, design, mythology, and philosophy converge and resonate on multiple levels. So thanks for joining us, Larry. And this is a really intricate and interesting piece. So tell us about it.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks to everybody at Able for inviting me to do this. This was such a great surprise and an opportunity to move through the pandemic and focus on this. So anytime I'm asked to talk about my work, there are 2 people that immediately come to mind. The first one is Anton Chekhov, and he said, "The secret to boring people lies in telling them everything." And then on the other end of the spectrum is Roger Gottschalk, who was one of my favorite professors in the art department at UW-Platteville. And every time I would ask him about his amazing paintings, he would just shrug his shoulders and say, "Well, what you see is what you get." So hopefully tonight I can land somewhere kind of in the middle. So I just wrote hopefully kind of a concise description of what happened here. And this I didn't set out to create a piece about American history or race or the history of racial injustice, but after the past year, when I just started putting things together, I found those things were just right beneath the surface, and they really came together in a pretty powerful way. So my piece is constructed from a few found objects, architectural salvage, and 24 pieces of ivory onto which I scrimshawed the following excerpt from the James Baldwin, a 1983 James Baldwin poem entitled "Staggerly Wonders." And so this is the poem that's in the box, and it goes as follows: "Lord, history is weary of her unspeakable liaison with time, for time and history have never seen eye to eye. Time laughs at history. And time and time and time again, time traps history in a lie. So the piece is intended to be read like a book. So the idea is to kind of hold onto that handle. You open the metal lid, and then the ivory pieces would be facing down, and then the viewer opens the lid and then turns each piece of ivory over one at a time, so the words are revealed one at a time. The piece is a kind of scale model of American history with regards to racial injustice. In addition to the words telling a story, the materials and their forms also tell a story as well. The title, which is Rafter, suggests a couple different meanings. First one, a rafter as in a beam that holds up a roof. And after reading quite a bit of Isabella Wilkerson's work in the past year, she describes our current crisis regarding race as follows. She compares living in America to it's like living in an old house and failing to take responsibility to make needed repairs. A rafter is also one who steers or pilots a raft. And as I was making this, a number of associations came to mind when I was, creating the piece. First of all, going all the way back to Greek mythology and the river of Lethe. So, as you go into the afterworld, once you cross that river, you forget everything from your previous life. There's also the Jarcol's Raft of the Medusa and the story behind that painting, which is very much about race. Huck Finn on the Mississippi. Also, Ishmael surviving the wreck of the Pequod from Moby Dick, and even George Washington crossing the Potomac. So the vertical peg is essentially a human figure. It's inert and featureless, save for his halo of whiteness.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, it's a compelling object just to view without all of that background, but it really is rich. And I think you get the sense when you look at it that there's a lot of depth to it and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to the overall pic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the metal box inset into the beam?
Yeah, it is. It's an oak beam that probably is from like the mid 19th century, if not earlier. And especially if you look at the previous slide, you can see that it's a hand hewn beam, and it's really heavy. It's oak, and then I chiseled out the space for the box so it could be inset. So it's just kind of a friction fit that goes. The box or the metal box sits inside of that. Inside of that space.
It's a really beautiful piece to have in the gallery space. If you have an opportunity to view it in its space, it relates to the building in such a lovely way.
Yeah.
Because we have these big sprawling beams throughout the space. So it has a lovely poetry to it and so many levels.
Yeah, and thanks to you guys for doing such a great job of presenting it. I mean, it's just you did just a beautiful job. So thanks to everybody for making that happen.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's a lovely piece.
All right, and now here we are with Reed. Reed Schoonover has an MFA from the University of Montana and a BAE from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. He is an accomplished potter, woodworker, and sculptor who exhibits his work across the United States. He was recently featured in a two-person show alongside Sandra Byers called Meticulous here at Able Contemporary Gallery. Reed currently resides and maintains his studio practice in Clintonville, Wisconsin. Thanks for joining us, Reed. And you are known for being an exceptionally good potter as well as an exceptionally good woodworker. And you marry these two things together, making these beautiful boxes that hold your ceramic vessels. So here's an example of that, and tell us about this piece.
Well, thank you. My work is, well, I see myself and my work as more mundane than the glorious piece that we just saw of Larry's, and I'm a little bit cowed by having seen that and then having to come to mind. But I thank you so much for this opportunity. This piece, again, like you say, is a marriage of ceramic and wood. I'm a wood fire potter, so actually I use wood in relation to the ceramic items, both in firing and then in presenting. I like multiples and work oftentimes in multiples, and here I've worked with multiples by putting one small pot inside of another. This is actually kind of a large piece for me. Most of my work is pretty small, and I like to work small. I like to work with detail and precision. And as far as the wood is concerned here, of course, the maple block turned gently and then softened edges. And the large Purple Heart piece that's inset and covers the ceramic pieces is a form of, for me, of enclosure or protection. And it's embellished just slightly with African blackwood. I'm a self-taught turner, so every time I'm on the lathe, I'm sort of challenging myself in one way or another. As you can see, the piece where it's exploded here with all its component parts, maybe it's hard to tell, but maybe not. The Purple Heart is very, very thin, and it has, for strength, I've glued a piece of African blackwood on the lip to help the piece retain its circumference, its roundness. I was afraid that it would warp a little too much. And other than that, I've just pretty much, I was trained as a potter and somewhat of a sculptor, both by Paul Donhauser at UW Oshkosh and then Rudy Audio at University of Montana. But did some woodwork at University of Montana, but primarily self-taught with everything that I do. And I like the meticulousness, to reference the previous show I was in there with Sandra Byers. I like working in a very precise way. And though I'm not much of a hand woodworker, most of what I do is machine woodworking. I still try to maintain a sense of kind of a personality or softness or something that is not as highly refined as most woodwork done by machine could be. I hope that's a good explanation.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I think of them as being a real celebration of functional objects, and that we can find sort of joy and almost ritual in everyday things, whether it's drinking a little whiskey or some tea or I think, there's a real joy in our lives when we have beautiful objects.
And that's true. I do see them as ritual items, and I see them also. I think my work references historic work that is an object of a historic interpretation in some ways of ritual items from the past that will be carried on into the future, and whether they're like this piece, multiple ceramic cups that may be used by one person, one vessel at a time, at one time or another, as opposed to the other vessels, or if they're shared with someone as a number of individuals sharing other vessels together. I do see my work as ritual and as a historic reference of ritual items.
I see kind of a couple different, not necessarily spinning off on that, but like I think of them somewhat playfully, like Russian dolls would be. But I also think of ecclesiastical, like Christian little things for. I'm not Catholic or anything, but that you would go and get communion or something like that. The priest would open up this little kit, and it'd all be all nicely put together, and it has that kind of a ritualistic.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I think people do oftentimes see them that way. Though, as a non-religious person, I see them more as ritual, as a form of bonding with something greater than oneself that is undefinable, or with others that you may be sharing with at the moment. But I get your point there. I understand that.
Well, these have a real timeless quality to them, and it brings to mind Hans Hofmann. He describes simplicity as the ability to remove the unnecessary so the necessary can speak. And I think that's exactly what these things do. It has exactly the right amount of everything to say what they have to say. They're really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Larry. I'm a simple man, and pretty basic in my life, and that means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
But simplicity generates complexity, and these are very complex pieces. I mean, they're deceptive. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but they're just they're really elegant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I briefly just say something? The one aspect I like about your work is that you're dealing with the circle, and you're using two different methodologies to create that circle. One is on a wheel with ceramics. The other is on a lathe with the wood, and there's certain duality that speaks to each other about that.
Oh yeah, thanks, Jim. Very quickly, I'd just like to say the materials that I use are either native hardwoods, or if you see that I've used exotic woods, all of the exotic woods I use are CITES certified. There are no gray market or black market woods of any type. I am very conscious of that.
Great. Hey, thank you, Reed. That was really wonderful. Thank you. And now we're looking at a terrific piece by Katie Hudnall. Katie received her BFA from Corcoran College of Art and Design and her MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University in Furniture Design and Woodworking. She has been the recipient of a Virginia Museum Fine Art Fellowship, the Windgate Wood Residency at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, an Anderson Ranch Residency, and most recently, a Creative Renewal Fellowship grant from the Indianapolis Arts Council. Her work has been included in many publications and exhibitions, including Studio Furniture, The Next Generation, Crafting a Continuum, Rethinking Contemporary Craft, and Making a Seat at the Table, Women Transforming Woodworking at the Center for Art in Wood in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She lives and works in Madison, Wisconsin, where she is an assistant professor and head of the wood program at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Katie, thank you for joining us, and thank you for including these wonderful pieces in our show.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So this piece and the other one are a little bit more playful. I was trained as an illustrator. That's kind of my first love, is drawing and illustration, and I think that usually is pretty evident in the pieces that I make. And I also use almost exclusively reclaimed materials. So I'm sort of always looking at the strange bits of wood that I pull out of dumpsters to try to figure out what they can be or how I can turn them into something. And one of the benefits, or I guess sort of like good side effects of COVID in this past year, is that I have focused a lot on smaller pieces, in part because I didn't have access to a big shop, and in part because I moved to Madison this year to take over Tom Loser's position, and so I was sort of like out of my studio for several months, but it's let me kind of focus on these smaller objects. So this is actually made in a very similar way to the way that Tom Loser's pieces were made. It's a bandsaw box at its core. Obviously, I took it in a slightly different direction, but that sort of central piece is a cutout from the interior of the block of wood that it came from. So the drawer is actually cut from that original block. And I am really interested in patterns. So there's like the sort of a highly patterned surface that I've drawn on there. And I'm really interested in boat forms. And so it is sort of loosely a boat form. It's also sort of reminded me of a shield. So it's kind of, it has some, I guess some of the language on the surface is pulled sort of directly from heraldry. And I guess I always want to take things out to like their like weirdest conclusion. So I wanted to make a handle for this form that became bigger than the form itself. So I made this sort of like weird, almost smokestack thing. And then I left it for like 4 months and came back to it and added the little brass piece, but I wasn't sure how to finish the top, like what should go on it. And like for a while it was like a big red ball, but it looked too much like a clown nose. And then I've been carving these little wooden propellers that are just like, they're fun to spin. Like they're handheld. You can just sort of like spin them and they go into the air. And it just eventually it sort of made sense that there would be a propeller up there, that it sort of was reminiscent of this notion of this thing being a boat, or maybe a boat becoming an airplane, or a connection between the two. So that's sort of where that came from. And yeah, I mean, that's sort of the basic. And I love black and white, like what Tom said. There's something, my mom always used to say that like, if you have black and white and one other color, you cannot go wrong. Your colors will always look good. And I kind of carried that into art school, and it has always been true. I actually think black and white and any two other colors, and it's always going to look aesthetically just incredibly pleasing. And it's been fun for me to learn color by using black and white and then a couple other colors to sort of mess with. But it's a place I go back to a lot for sure.
It's great. You know, it almost feels anthropomorphic or something. Is that the right word? I mean, I know what that word means, but because they look like feet, and then it almost seems like some crazy long nose or something, but then there's this propeller and there's all this movement that it's suggesting. It's really great.
Like Rube Goldberg had a baby with Dr. Seuss.
If anybody has ever seen the illustrations by a wonderful Australian children's book author, although he writes books illustrates books for adults too, but a guy named Sean Tan, it does absolutely gorgeous illustrations, sometimes of really sort of dark things, but just beautifully done and incredibly fantastical. And I think that these were probably influenced by him to some degree, that anthropomorphic sort of idea. But everything I make becomes creature-like. I almost can't help it.
Yeah, it truly is, Katie. It's very insect-like. And I would say, as far as that propeller, I think that's a absolutely perfect resolution to the top of the piece. Looking at it, it just helps to hold the piece down rather than allowing it to just move off into space.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but you know, I was making this piece as I was moving to Madison, and there's the drive between Indianapolis and Madison that cuts through a lot of Illinois with the windmill fields.
Mhm.
And I
All those
suddenly am
windmills,
thinking,
yes.
oh, I guess those were maybe a pretty big influence too, those huge turbines.
Yeah, also speaking of other illustrators, it kind of reminds me of the British illustrator, I think it's Chantal Martin,
Oh,
kind of with this black and white drawing. And it's something about it just strikes me as utopic. I don't know if it's kind of futuristic with the propeller, especially being up so high and kind of in this bizarre configuration that, you know, is either negating gravity or fighting with it or something. I really enjoy the playfulness, and Chantel also adds faces to almost everything, especially like in the city and mountains and all this. So
oh,
really interesting.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll look them up. Thank you.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Well, and one of the things I think about this box, like, and I guess I kind of wondered it about all of you who made boxes. I mean, Barry, we know you made what is in your quote unquote box, so you're different, but like, do you ever think about what's going to be in this box? Like, what is this box going to hold? Or does that never come into your mind?
For this one, I wasn't thinking about it. Like I was really interested in the form itself, and then I'm totally fine with letting it hold whatever it wants to hold. But a lot of the things I've been doing recently have been boxes for collections, and a lot of the collections have been of sort of natural objects that I've found. So I like in the last year or so, I've made a box for acorns that held like 200 acorns, and then I made a box for I just finished a box for maple helicopters.
I love that.
And so, you know, like I think I'm really interested in this idea of making a special space for something. Yeah, and in this case, it was just open. I think just one object would fit in there. Only one object will sit well, unless it's full of maybe seeds. Maybe seeds go in there. Yeah, I didn't have an idea.
No, and it's cool. Like because that the vacant space becomes important in the box, you know, and you know, when people have little boxes or jars around their house, I think about like if you were to come to our house and pick up the jars, there's weird little like things from nature, or maybe an animal bone and some odd bits of stuff. I don't, you know.
Yeah, I have this one on my desk, and it's this ornate box that has, among other things, acorns and a peach pit and some writing nibs. Like it's funny what we collect together and kind of how those things talk to each other.
Absolutely.
It's fun. It's interesting because I think I'm the only person that starts with an object and builds the box specifically for the object. And then ultimately I see that as one unit. The object and the box are then inseparable.
Yeah, it's true.
So everybody
nothing
else
else can fit in your box.
Yeah, everybody else, well, with the exception of the poem, everybody else is making boxes that you can put your heart into, be it a maple propeller or a helicopter or an acorn or whatever. Those little items are part of your heart, and you secret those away in those boxes, and I think that's absolutely wonderful.
Great. Hey, thanks, Katie. So now we're on to someone actually whose boxes are sort of pushing the conceptual bounds of this, but he knows exactly what's going to be inside his quote unquote box because he made it. So this is Barry Roll Carlson. Barry has an MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a BFA from the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Barry is an accomplished oil painter as well as a printmaker whose work is in many public and private collections, too many to mention. Barry's commitment to the arts is impressive, and in addition to his studio practice, he is a well-respected instructor, lecturer and art organizer, having been integral in the formation of the group's Big Tent project and Vox Populi, a national print collective. Barry, thanks for joining us today. Your boxes are just lovely.
Thanks. I guess I've made a lot of these little retablo pieces over the years, and many of them have sides, so they are a little bit more box-like. These that are in the show this time are kind of distilled down to the essence of a lid and a hinge. So they're two-dimensional at a certain level, but then they operate to be able to be seen from this closed view, which I use some abstract elements that I'm in my mind's eye, at least kind of deriving some reference to some of the subject matter inside. And I like the idea that there's a connection, but also a bit of a disconnection and the surprise if you were to look at it from this perspective and then pop it open. It's radically different from the outside. So there's a circular motif on the outside, and that kind of brings reference to the rings in the water and the moon and or the sun rather in the sky and the reflection, of course. And the iconography is kind of in my bifurcated work system, kind of akin to most of my paintings. They're representational, traditional, and differ a bit from the graphic work that I do in printmaking. So the outside has some reference more to the print forms that I'm investigating, and the things inside are more just looking back or seeing what I guess a lot of people are more familiar with than my body of work that's more well known. So the iconography is basically derived from kind of symbolic / personal references that I guess could be seen in many others' eyes in different ways. It's not a particular person exactly, but it's some the idea of some metaphorical use of figures and landscape as kind of a metaphor, an avatar, if you will, sometimes for a personality, or touching on something that I guess I hope is beyond my personal experience. I have an affinity for North Woods, and I have an affinity for bits of nature, although I probably don't entertain them enough. In this case, I have this idea of the surface, something unknown under the surface, and then somebody maybe coming up, rising to the air, or being trapped under the surface. So I don't try to spell it out too explicitly. It's just called rising in this case. So that's kind of the essence of absence and presence. The interior of the middle panel, absent the person and some evidence of action of the person, and then have the two wings be possibly the person under the water. I don't know. That's about it. Oh, one thing I will say is that it's made from urban wood. It's walnut that's been saved from trees that have been cut down around Madison. So my woodworking skills are fairly rudimentary in the august company that I am in with, but I do appreciate being a part of the show.
It's really lovely, and your paintings, they always, I think they make the viewer feel like it's a place that perhaps you've been. There's nostalgia, but there's always a little bit of mystery, I think, as well, that you're able to capture. And in this case, you do sort of, and it could be anything from sort of, I almost feel like I can hear the silence, and like the places that you paint are a place that I feel like I could meditate and hear myself think in, and perhaps that she's having actually a beautiful night's swim, and feels sort of comforted, I think.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I don't want it to seem scary.
No, it doesn't seem, not
Sure.
to me. No, it seems like a really good place. Like I want to be there.
Your paintings often feel lonely to me in a poetic way, in a beautiful way, but there's an isolation that that resonates within your work. And I think this is another example of that.
Thanks. Yeah, I do. I think that's present in almost everything I paint, seems.
I think for me, you sort of allow the viewer to bring their own um, history, in a sense, and life experiences to the work, and you're willing to allow the viewer to do that, and that sense of mystery that Teresa spoke of is really very powerful and evident here.
Well, thanks. One of the things I've always enjoyed over the years is for the people that don't know me personally, if they stand in front of a work, oftentimes I'll hear an interesting insight that it's like, wow, I didn't think of that, but yeah, it's there. So I do think that people do invest their own life history or, own best intentions in the work. And I think that's something that I learned from and appreciate.
Well, the small gown or whatever it is on the dock,
Mm-hmm.
and the house in the background, just sort of are clues that are not discernible or understandable, perhaps. Those they're clues, but what are they clues of? For me.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry.
Sure. Thank you all.
Gosh.
All right. And so now we are going to talk to Richard Jones. Richard is most well known as the creative force behind Studio Paran, a hot glass studio, which was a staple of the Madison arts community. Richard's work as an artist encompasses many creative endeavors ranging from lighting to sculpture and installation. Many people will recall Richard's wonderful installation, The Spaciousness of Uncertainty, from 2020 in our number 5 gallery. Richard received a BFA in glass from Rhode Island School of Design in 1988. He then worked for and with other glass artists, and in 2006 took over full ownership of Studio Paran. Richard recently ceased hot glass production, and so we are excited to see what new creative paths he goes down. We're so happy that you made these new boxes for this show, Richard. They're really lovely. So tell us a little bit about these pieces.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. It's often something like this that jumpstarts something. It's always good to have a deadline. So the actual glass components in these I'd made years ago and were sitting on a storage shelf. And then I knew I wanted to go with a sort of architectural form, a reference, and I've often used glass as a way to reference or evoke water in one form or another, and moving water or ice or something like that. I think the correspondences are natural and evocative. So they all these pieces just kind of came about through a dialogue with the material, and were not pre-planned really in any way. I've looked at a lot of reference material on traditional Japanese architecture, and aesthetically that's a kind of touchstone for me. And then I've been thinking a lot about water, and wanting and needing to meditate on that and its meaning in our lives. As many people know, our little blue planet we're living on is covered over 70% of it is covered in water, and our own bodies are made up of 60% water, which is always an astounding fact to be reminded of. So when the indigenous people that have been recently fighting the construction of fossil fuel pipelines, when they say water is life, we can understand that from this perspective. Our own bodies are made up of water, and the earth that we live on, water is essential. So in a poetic sense, that water is our home, our house. So these are titled water houses. And I just wanted to make something that would be a meditative object that you could kind of look at and contemplate, bring up these thoughts to ruminate on. I'll just read one little thing that's always another touchstone for me. The Tao Te Ching, probably most of you are familiar with. There are many translations, and to read different translations is to kind of elucidate or kind of come at a better understanding of the text. But the one that I've come across that has the most resonance is the translation by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this is chapter 8. Doing the right thing is like water. It's good for all living things and flows without thinking about where it's going, just like Tao. Keep your feet on the ground. Remember what's important. Be there when people need you. Say what you mean. Be prepared for anything. Do whatever you can whenever it needs doing. If you don't compare yourself to others, no one can compare to you. It's often translated, water is the highest good. But yeah, that's something, that one little chapter is something I always come back to think about. What else can I say about these? I really had a lot of fun making them, because I got back to a space of creating where they weren't planned out at all, and there was a great deal of play and exploration, and dialogue between myself and the material. And they may look really planned out, but in fact they were not at all.
Beautiful.
Where are these found, or I assume they're found pieces of, looks like root structure or branches? Are those local or?
Yeah, a couple of them came from the willow tree that I have in front of my property. The one with the stone on it, that actually was a piece of driftwood I picked up last fall on the shore of Lake Superior.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we were up there last fall. I picked up a lot of rocks. I don't want to driftwood.
Yeah, I mean, I think as artists, we really, we hope to get to that place when we're making something where we're just responding without overthinking it, you know? and able to just be in the moment of what we're making and do it without overthinking it or over editing ourselves. But they're lovely, and they feel like they're just exactly what they're supposed to be, and there's nothing too little or nothing too
Yes.
much, and almost like they exist the way nature does. Like it's just sort of there, and that's the way it's supposed to be. They're really lovely.
Yeah, I often think that my best work comes from not from approaching it without too much intention. And I guess what I mean by that is like a preformed idea about what it is, what it should be. But then I feel like that the work can express more than it can reach in and like bring out parts of me that I'm not necessarily even conscious of. So trying to, yeah, I think each of us contain more mysteries than we realize.
Yeah,
You're here.
it's great. Yeah, thank you, Richard. The work is really lovely, and it makes me excited to
It really
think
is.
about what you'll be doing in the future.
Thank you.
All right, and I think Tim O'Neill is the last artist in the box show before we move on to Ian Van D. So Tim O'Neill, after a professional career as a studio furniture maker, O'Neill returned to academia to receive an MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, focusing on metalsmithing. He has exhibited his work in wood and metal across the country. He currently works as a 3D technician in sculpture, glass, and digital fabrication at UW-Madison and maintains an active studio practice. You may also know him as my husband and co-owner of the gallery. His most recent work in his studio involves foundry work combined with his woodwork and his other metal practices. But he did get in the studio to work entirely in wood again to make these fabulous boxes for this show. So thanks, Tim. And tell us about this box.
Well, first, I just want to thank you again for having this show and inviting all of us to participate in this little conference of woodworkers and painters and so forth. Thank you, Lauren and Ann as well.
Yeah.
I've been interested in architecture all of my adult life. And in fact, at one point I was pursuing an architecture degree, and you know, your life takes different turns, and I ended up not being an architect, but there are other things that could satisfy my urges for building, such as furniture. And now I wanted to kind of go back and kind of examine what a house is. And in true reality, it is a container. It's a very large container that houses us as human beings, and all of our things are stuff of furniture and clothing and food and water, which are essential things that we need to grow and develop. And one of those things is housing. And I believe it to be an essential part of being a human being, is that we all need housing to live in a safe environment. And so with that, you know, I wanted to explore a particular style, which is the ranch. And Teresa and I just celebrated 6 years of living in a wonderful ranch home in Madison that was built in 1955. So the mid-century era of building was really important to me. And one of the architects that I really am influenced by is Richard Neutra. And
yes.
he had a really prolific career, not only building houses in California, but other buildings, facilities, commercial spaces. And so this is kind of the takeoff point from there. As a lot of his pieces go, he would have these massive walls would either house a fireplace or being used as a focal area for division within the space of a house. And so this little box is kind of a representation of that. and also the low slung nature of his work and the cantilevered flat roofs. So, you know, it has that influence there. And in the back, you can see these tiny little tabs that are kind of referencing fenestrations or windows within a space, a dark area that would bring light into it. So, and the other aspect of this too is that, you know, with this box as a house, it will now hold smaller objects of our lives and special things that we enjoy and possess and have history with, like we were talking about earlier with acorns or little fetishes of sorts that you can put in this box and kind of honor them. So that's kind of the overall influence and idea behind this piece. And I've done some other boxes that are relating to different types of ranch homes. And I actually want to continue with this little series. It's a lot of fun, and it's a good break from making bigger pieces of artwork. And so that's about it. Oh, I did make some other series for the show as well. Briefly, these boxes were kind of a result of a large commission that I'm working on right now for a really good patron of mine in California. And I'm building a tower piece that has segments of carving that are overall shape is octagonal. And as it goes high up to almost 7 feet, it tapers. So I've been doing a lot of this carving in my past, and I wanted to bring that forward again. And it's really kind of my own hieroglyphics, so to speak, influenced through Egyptian artwork and architecture and Mayan ruins and architecture. So these are basically some of the cutoffs from the piece, this tower piece that I'm making. And it's being octagonal. It's like, I've been thinking about octagons for a long time now, almost more than 6 months, working on this major piece. So I think that was just kind of the influence behind it, and kind of utilizing some of my scrap pieces to make an object that has some kind of relevance to a relic or something like that.
So do you see any Frank Lloyd Wright references in pieces like this, Tim?
Not so much with this piece. I mean, well, I take that back, because he did some work in California with
Yes,
some houses that utilized this heavy relief.
yes.
And he was also influenced by Mayan work as well. So yeah, I could see that. The previous piece, yeah, it has this low line line of a horizon, which is something that Wright used a lot, you know, in his prairie style. So.
Well, I see more Wright in this piece, I think, and yeah, I loved your reference to Richard Neutra. I could see that, you know, immediately, practically.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, beautiful work, beautiful piece, and a great reference.
Yeah. I must add that the black part here is it's cedar that I've carved, machine carved, and cut up and rearranged, and then burnt with a torch, and then a finish is applied to that. So the burning kind of gives it this ancient feel, kind of like it was worn away through erosion, and that's kind of how I see it when I'm looking at, you know, either Egyptian work or the Mayan work.
It may not be in your intention, but I think the interest I have in these little things, the little containers, are that they have that weathered kind of distressed look from the fire and the carving, of course, but they have kind of a contemporary, they look like a glitchy video to me.
Yeah.
They have kind of like there's information that's been garbled.
Yeah.
And I try to seek out some kind of continuity in the shapes, and I don't see them so much as language as kind of a deconstructed image, so to speak, and then having the stress with something as ancient as fire is an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah.
For me.
I mean, this original carving, when I started doing this in the early 2000s, that it was about language and really not understanding past histories and their languages. And that, you know, at the time I was working on that original piece way back in like 2001, you know, archaeologists knew maybe a quarter of what the Mayan hieroglyphics were talking about. And now it's much more. But I like that idea, that notion that we may never know exactly what they were saying and contemplating within their culture. We know a lot, but there's still areas that we don't. And I like that idea of not really knowing completely. And so, yeah, you get this stratification and that digitized feel with this as well. You're right. So I'm glad you caught up on that. Yeah.
Or how to begin decoding this piece.
Yeah. It's like they're all my symbols, and I know what they mean, but I'm keeping that to myself. I want the viewer to kind of put things together and see what they want in these images or symbols.
And part of what was fantastic about these for me was that I had only really worked with you on your crows. So when I was walking through the gallery, when I was setting up my installation, and I got to walk past, and I literally stopped and was like, I wonder who made these boxes. And I walked over and I saw that you made them. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that this is what Tim made beyond the crows. And so it was really exciting for me to see that like you had this whole other, like your own like hieroglyphic carving language, like, you know, it spoke, we talk a lot about like meaning, I guess the meanings of prose, like that's what a lot of our discussions when working in Foundry together have been.
Yeah.
And seeing this like whole other language in wood for you was like really eye-opening for me.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
That's great. Hey, thanks, Tim, and thanks everybody from the box show. And Ian, you jumping in, this is a perfect way to start talking about your show. And if I'm remembering things, I think we actually owe it to Tim, who was the one who saw your work at the UW. You are currently at the UW working on your Master of Fine Arts degree. And Tim was really impressed by your work. And so that's how we ended up with your show in number 5. So we're going to look, do we have a video of Ian's show, Lauren? So we're going to look at a video of your work. Ian's show is called Vacant Rites, Selected Works from the Splinters in Our Hands. And in the show, Ian has some prose that he's written that is on the walls, and I just want to read one of them that I thought was quite nice as we're looking at the video. Across from an old god house, in a motocross street melt, he tries to share how it feels to watch snow fly through barn skeletons. The white with the red, and the red with the dusty brown. That's really nice, Ian.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, thank you.
I hope I read that okay.
Oh, absolutely beautiful, beautiful.
So while we're watching the video, Ian, can you tell us a little bit about the rest of your background? Where you did your undergraduate work and where you were born?
Yeah, absolutely. I was initially born in Berkeley, California. I'm really a West Coast kid. I came from California, moved to Denver when I was 11, and then did my undergrad out in Tacoma, Washington. And then after finishing my sculpture degree there, I just went right into my MFA. So and came to Madison. So that is, and it's funny, when I actually began my BFA, I was not pursuing art. If anything, I was pursuing film, which is in some ways an art form, and I consider it as such. But I had really no interest in sculpture until I was maybe a sophomore in college. So it's interesting how quickly my work, how quickly I guess I jumped into the path of being like a sculptor and really identifying as such, you know, deeply in my identity.
Yeah. And so, you know, this show is selected works from the Splinters in Our Hands. So was that another, so explain that and then talk to us about that title.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Splinters in Our Hands was my MA exhibition, and what I wanted to clarify was that Vacant Rites was very much the sculptural installation from the Splinters in Our Hands. The Splinters in Our Hands was really capturing the work that I had started back in the fall, and that was including a series of photos that was an ongoing project of outdoor work that I was doing very much in a similar site responsive way, where I was taking barnwood and other sorts of found wood and putting it in locations around Madison in like a kind of in a ritual, or not just Madison, but Montana and other places around Wisconsin. And that was a very like physical and ritualistic way of working. And then as for the Vacant Rites, that was just the sculptures I made for the Splinters in Our Hands. And the thing about the whole show, the Splinters in Our Hands, is it felt very much as much as it was inside the gallery, it felt just as much outside the gallery. There was this like kind of larger conversation of all the places I'd been and how it led to this moment. And for Vacant Rites, I wanted it to be about the gallery and me responding to the gallery and having the work in this space, in this old tobacco factory, with the wires like connecting to the walls, having to hold up the work. Like that was really important to me, that it felt like it was in response to this place.
Yeah, it's great in there, you know, and I was worried a little bit, you know, if all of the wood would sort of compete, but when you go in there, it looks like it's supposed to be in there, and you've walked into I don't know, in a forest or something. I don't know, but it works really well. And then these few pieces that are sort of cantilevered off the wall and against the white are spectacular. And then you get that extreme shadow of the piece. It's just great.
Yeah, thank you. It's funny because I have been visiting your gallery since my my first year as a grad student. It was actually maybe one of the first art spaces I visited in Madison, and I walked in and I was like, oh, I want to show here so bad. I want this to happen so badly. And part of it was because I felt that the space just worked with a lot of my work. And but also to keep in mind, at the time I was making very colorful, very different kinds of work. And so I think it was just a perfect timing of like the style of work I was making changed in such a way where it just kind of met with the aesthetics of the space, and it just happened to work out so perfectly. And so for me, getting to bring this into this space was just it was almost like a perfect meeting of two things that just was so exciting for me.
I think that's, oh, sorry, Teresa.
No, you go ahead, Tim.
I think that's one of the things that both Teresa and I enjoy, when an artist can come into this space and look at it and kind of try and transform it. And I think your work really works at that level because of it's a massive wood structure, right? And you're utilizing your wood in a particular area of construction and building, and it has this force to it, just like the building. And I've seen this work in another space, and I was kind of lost in it, but in the smaller space, I feel like I'm being surrounded and consumed by it almost. And it's an eerie feeling, yet it's really kind of enlightening because it has almost the effect of a cathedral. You know, you're in this closed confined surface or area, and your eye goes upward into the heavens, and you think about other ethereal things,
Yeah,
So I'm glad you could do that and transform it.
yeah, thanks, Tim. That means a lot. I spent there was a particular summer I spent a little time in Italy, and it was really that time where I like began to experience, it was like that first stage of like looking up to have for the religious experience. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you just see this kind of architecture that is just like, is just not something that is domestic in America. And so I had really seen that for the first time. And I remember, and when installing this work and creating that work, I wanted to provide that kind of that feeling of like it's looming at you, it's like coming out of the walls. But I wanted to do it with, you know, I wanted to do it with like broken pieces of a home, or you know, like all these like unwanted objects, as opposed to something that might be, you know, like a big, beautiful marble sculpture. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I saw the show last week at Greg Schulte's opening, and I was the only person upstairs, and I kept thinking, if I was in this building alone with them, I get the feeling they're very anthropomorphic at points, and they, you know, have many references that I make. They kind of remind me of a Swedish illustrator, and his work's pretty dystopian, and I don't see these as that way, but Simon Stalenhag. But they have this kind of idea of, in my peripheral vision, I feel like they would move subtly.
Right.
And I'd turn and you know, they would stop. They wouldn't, but it's almost their anthropomorphism. That's kind of a clumsy way to put it, but I mean, they have a life to themselves that I think works in that space, probably works in many other spaces too, but they're scaled right.
Mm-hmm.
And moving around them, I get that feel.
You know,
Yeah,
I haven't seen these in person, but I think what you just said about they are scaled right, even just seeing them here on the computer, I understand that. I mean, they do have that aspect. They are scaled right. And when you mentioned Italy, Ian, it just brought to mind art povera, you know, impoverished art. Are you familiar with? Yeah, and I think your works are in that tradition to a certain extent, but in a very positive way, you know.
I hadn't thought of that, Reed, but that makes a whole lot of sense to me now that you mention it.
Yeah, it's quite a movement, and it's been a favorite of mine for a long time.
It's absolutely a movement I'm inspired by, without question. I feel like when I entered into art school, that was absolutely one of the first books I took out of the library.
I think we were all living that at one time too, Ian.
Right. I would only dream of such a thing.
Would you mind just telling me the Montana connection? I did my MFA there, and my wife's a native of Montana.
No, so I have family that live in Montana. They live in Helena, and so I spent summers fly fishing in Helena, Montana. But I did a residency last summer at the Holter Museum of Helena, Montana, which I believe is the Holter Museum of Art, which was a fantastic residency. I was so happy to get to show and exhibit there. And so part of why I brought up Montana is when I first started using found wood was really in Montana. I was taking found wood and putting canvas over it and doing rubbings off of it that were huge, and they hung almost like flags. And that use of found wood like kind of like turned into these into the like anthropomorphic scarecrow like sculptures in the show. And so it kind of, I mean, my time in Montana was just deeply powerful, and I'm in fact returning to that museum in July to teach some classes. So I love Montana.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, when you're in the space, and because they're larger than human scale, when you're walking through them, sometimes, you know, they seem to me like, I mean, I could be walking through for it, like they're deconstructed trees or something, or you're trying to make trees again out of scrap. I thought about that, but and especially the pieces hanging from the wall. I also they do have a sense where they feel like crucifixes or cruciforms or something.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's you can't. They seem ancient and almost futuristic at the same time, and I don't want to say dystop. I mean, dystopian sounds a little can be so depressing, but there's I guess just in the fact that we think of dystopian futures as the future, or
Mhm.
that you're reusing all of these found boards and things.
The illustrator I mentioned is Stoneheig, is a retro futurist, and his stuff looks totally different if you ever Googled him, but they have some odd similarities.
How about prototypes for biomechanical apparatus?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I don't know if I would ever use that terminology, but sure, yeah.
Yeah, they have a very elegiac quality. I mean, I felt like I was walking into a memorial of some sort. So they certainly had that that quality. I mean, a very kind of a very powerful sense of something being memorialized.
Mhm. No,
And, keep going.
no, I was just going to respond to Larry, but what I was going to say is a lot of the material in this show is from one cherry tree that was it was kind of it was my friend and his father, they had kind of they had this cherry tree in their yard for years. They they cut it down, chainsaw milled it, and they put it in storage, and then they're clearing out storage during COVID, and they know me probably like as the maker of someone who will just take all their trash, all their things. So they're like, hey Ian, do you want this giant pile of cherry wood? And absolutely, I agreed. And so what was funny is like I got more wood than I knew what to do with, and so the work really developed out of this donation. And so in many ways it is kind of a lot. I think a lot of my work is in some ways memorializing the life of trees, the death of trees, and the rebirth of trees. But in this case specifically, it's like a lot of it is one tree, and I think so. It does feel like this like response to this like what once great, grand, massive cherry tree. So it becomes like uh, you're almost surrounded by the inside by like the insides of one object, which I found to be a fantastic part of my thinking of the installation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you kind of answered my question in that. I was just wondering, like, I guess, what do you see as the presence that, because you walk into the space and you immediately feel a presence, I would say. Do you see this as, the remnants of a derelict building? Is this the chaotic aftermath of a tree's death? I guess, what do you see inhabiting the space?
So I really read this the way that these inhabit a space as almost they're expressions of a kind of a spirit. I would consider it. I've called it like kind of an American spirit, as far as just something that possesses land and material. I did a lot of reading of kind of materiality and different notions of how we put ghosts into spaces. So the way Tim is talking about homes and how a box is a home to who we are, it is as much a home to who we are as kind of our own histories, as well as our own superstitions. And I see this very much in land and the way that we engage with land. And when discussing certain concepts of either contemporary American history or industrialism or materiality, we get all these different kind of feelings of superstition, as well as kind of facts of religion and how we believe in and how we perceive I guess, our own spirit as well as like the spirit of death, perhaps. And so for me, this is a haunted space. This is a haunting space. I consider these objects to be kind of haunting objects that are kind of lurking both in our living spaces as well as our outdoor spaces. Sorry, I kind of got off there for a second.
No, thank you. That was great.
That was super interesting. Yeah. Lauren, were there, I don't suppose, are there any questions from anybody
Um,
as of right now?
Not questions per se. There's some comments about whoever was speaking at any given moment. Pat Schoonover says that these remind her, that Ian's sculptures remind her of old buildings and abandoned homesteads in Montana, which I think is absolutely resonant.
Yeah, that is absolutely on point.
Yeah. Marysville or Garnett. You'll have to visit those, Ian.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot, part of why I think when talking about Montana and actually comments of like rebirth, I spent a lot of time fly fishing in burn zones, or I should say post burn zones. So they're kind of in their stages of rebirth. And
Right.
that I just found to be one of the most moving parts of like, I mean, we're also during a pandemic, like being in the aftermath of a burn zone was just like intensely moving to me. And so I felt this like call to respond to just what was happening to our society in relation to what was happening to nature, and it just felt all so close and compact. And so the idea of just Montana and landscape and death and rebirth, it was all very, very much inspirational for the show.
Great. So I don't know how many of the artists who are still here are going to be able to join us tomorrow evening.
I'll be there.
Great.
Sure. Yeah.
Sorry, but I will not be able to be.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd maybe drive down here, Reed, but that's all right. And so, because tomorrow we are, as I said at the beginning of this, we're hosting an RSVP only in-person reception. There are still some spaces available, and you can sign up at ablecontemporary.com or call us in the gallery tomorrow and we can sign your name up. So if you have the opportunity to see the shows in person, they're really outstanding. The shows are available in the gallery and online, April 16th through May 30th. We have taped this virtual artist reception / artist talk, and it will be available at some point.
Immediately after, it'll be on their website.
Oh, immediately after. Thanks, Lauren. So you can, so people can watch it again, and for the artists, you can direct people to watch it again. So this is really great. The gallery is open regular hours, Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 5. Masks are required, but reservations are not required just to come to the gallery. So please do visit us if you can. And hey, to all the artists, this has been so interesting, inspiring, and great. And I'm so glad that you joined us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am truly honored, Teresa. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so
and
welcome.
me as well. This was absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the show is just great. And yeah.
Thanks for the Montana connection, Ian. Pat and I have wanted in these days of COVID to go back to Montana so badly and just have not done so. And so you've brought a little bit of Montana to our hearts.
That might be the biggest compliment I could have ever received. So
Thank you.
Aw.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to show at a gallery there in Helena, no longer exists, Terman Larison Gallery. Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. I mean, it's funny. I work with a lot of the ceramics artists in Helena.
Oh, at the Braid.
I'm sure we have a connection
Somehow.
amongst that crew. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Great.
Thank you all so much.
Say good night.
Thanks
Thank
for-
you.
All
Yeah.
right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
All
Thank you.
right, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye, everybody.